Hello, Management Science 394 students. I want to go through the access analysis that we did with the dead on the money example in class. We went through a lot of access steps, and I'm sure it's hard to recall all of those from watching in class. So this way, as you're going through your assignments, if those steps would be helpful to look at again, you'll have this video for reference. So you start with having 3 tables in your Access database. And you should go ahead and take a peek at all of those tables, check out the fields that you have in the tables. Also take a look at the counts of the rows in the tables. So you can come down here and click on this arrow and it will get you to the last observation. So you can see in this case there's about 2,165 rows, or exactly 2,165 rows. Okay, and then you might go ahead and do that for your other tables as well. Here's code cost. It has the item code, the description, and the cost of the item. And you can take a peek down here and see you've got roughly 1,900 rows. And then your list of dead beneficiary IDs. And again, you can look down here and see you've got 2,045 rows. Now you're going to want to set up your relationships between your tables. So you'll go to Database Tools, Relationships. We're going to drag all of these tables over. I'm going to put my claim lines table in the middle because it has common fields to both of the other tables. One of the common fields is the beneficiary ID. The beneficiary ID in the dead beneficiary table corresponds to the beneficiary ID in the claim lines table. So I'm going to say create, so Access knows that that's a common field. And I'm going to double click on this relationship and just show you the join type. The join type defaults to what's called an inner join. And in an inner join, we're going to only include rows where the join fields from both tables are equal. And that's what I want in this case. So I'm going to click OK. So when I work with queries in Excel with this type of relationship, we're gonna see in a minute, we're gonna get a result where only rows where the beneficiary ID is in both the dead beneficiary table and also in the claim line table appear. Okay, also item code in the claim lines table corresponds to item code in the code cost table. So I'm gonna click create, and again, this is gonna default. Click on join type to the inner join format that I talked about, which is going to be what I want. Okay, we're going to see how that works in right now, actually. What I want to do next is I want to create that table where I'm going to think of it as I'm just pulling out the claim lines where the claim line actually had a beneficiary ID for a beneficiary who was deceased. So I'm going to say create, let's see, query wizard. And I just want simple query wizard. I'm going to include all of the claim lines from the claim lines table. I'm sorry, all of the fields rather. And I'm also going to pull from my dead beneficiary IDs, the dead beneficiary ID, and click finish. And now it has produced for me a query that has all of the fields in the claim lines. And we have added the dead beneficiary ID. So notice here, if you look at this field and this field, the beneficiary IDs match. Okay, so here it is. If you scroll on down. And notice that my count down here is 1,074. And that makes sense to me because I have less rows than I did in my original claim lines table, and also less rows than I had in my dead beneficiaries table. And that makes sense because, again, I only included rows where the beneficiary ID was common to both tables. All right, so I'm part of the way there. What I want to do to get a table with all of the information that I want is I want to now pull in the item description and the item cost. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to have to shut the table first. if I don't rename this, these names get really big really quickly. So I'm going to call this D. Benny claims. All right, so just the claim lines where we had the dead beneficiaries. And I'm going to do another query now to pull in the code calls. So I'm going to go to create query wizard again, simple query wizard. And this time I want to use that query that I just created, the dead Benny claims. I'm going to include all of those fields. And I'm also going to include from my code cost table the description and also the cost. I'm going to go ahead and also include the item cost. It's a little bit redundant, but I just like to check that those item codes actually match when I'm finished. So click finish. Right, let's pull these over so we can see everything. We have the claim line, the beneficiary ID from the claim line. I'm going to make this a little smaller so we can see the provider ID. This is the item code from the claim line, the dead beneficiary ID. I'm going to make that really small. And here's the code from the cost table, and you can see that those codes match. And we have the same number of records that we did in the first query, and that makes sense. I didn't want to lose or add any records. I was just pulling in the item cost and description, and now those are on the end. I have the cost and also the description here. Okay, now remember that you can also go in, I'm just going to go back to both of these queries. I'm going to go to Home and View, and I can look at the design view, and this shows me that relationship again. Shows me that I have an inner join. It shows me what fields were included. You can also look at the SQL view. All right, and so you can see here, this is the table name and the field name after the dot. The table name and the field name. And this is saying as, so we're going to select it from the claim lines table. It's the beneficiary ID, and in the new query, it's going to be named claim lines underscore Benny underscore ID. So when you see this as, that's the new name it's going to assign it in the query. And so you see all the fields that it's selecting, and it's selecting from the table dead Bennies as an inner join with the table claim lines on dead Benny ID equals the claim lines Benny ID. All right, so this is just a preview of SQL. We're going to go through the SQL in a lot more detail later, but it's a good idea to just go ahead and start looking at the SQL code to get a feel for it before we formally go into the SQL code. Here's the dead Benny's query, Home, and you can go to View, Design View again, and so you can see that these were joined on the item code, just as we planned. It shows all the fields that we've included. And let's see, Home, View, SQL View. All right, so again, we start with select, and now it's going to go through all the fields that we're selecting. And when you see the word as, they're just renaming what that field name is going to be called in the new query. From, and you have your two tables that we're selecting from, dead Benny claims and code cost. And this is an inner join again, right? So we're going to only include rows that match on item code for both of the dead Benny claims and also the code cost where their item code matches. All right, and so that's what they're showing right here. Okay, so I'm going to stop with this video. In the next video, I will pick up on using the group by feature to sum up by provider ID and by item code.